Look at this piece of technology, guys. Wowee. Got 3 screens. You could be streaming your cable right to your phone. You could be browsing the web on YouSearch. You could be YouTubing, you searching, and you listening right there, I guess. If only Steve Jobs would have read the November 2000 issue of Scientific American. Could have got the iPhone 7 years earlier. Anyways, so I want to browse a specific magazine today. I've had this one for maybe 20 years now. I might read the whole thing one day. This was pretty cool. Not for today, but what science will know in 2050. I wanted to see how, especially artificial intelligence, AI, we are getting eerily close to some beyond human capable AI, and that's kind of alarming, but also really exciting at the same time. So I wanted to see what that was all about with those predictions there. Some of these I just kept purely for a look, you know, at the time capsule aspect of, to be able to put ourselves back in the perspective of people years ago, and in some cases here. I found a stack in my local thrift store. I think this was the one by the flea market, and this lady just in the corner kind of collecting dust had a whole stack of old-time magazines. This one's from what's this one from? Let's see. The ads in these alone are worth browsing through them. Special anniversary issue. Anyways, well, this one doesn't want to say. This one's from 1979 here. This is literally from my childhood. I was about 10 years old when I got this. Or no, probably like 7 or 8 actually. Got GoldenEye killer ambushes. Anyway, I want to look through that one too. It's when the N64 was still very, very new. Let's see, when did this come out? 100th issue, September. Never got one of these magazines, didn't put. Sure, it's around 96 or 97, but they never put the date on them, the year. So these Time magazines, 1966. Actually, that's probably the oldest one I have, right there. And here's like a big special double issue here from 1984. And here we are. We've arrived at the star of the show here. The Lunar Module. The Life magazine from March 14th, 1969. And this, with a sophisticated double exposure here. They probably took the same piece of film, literal piece, actual physical piece of film, and exposed the LEM and the Lunar Module and the Saturn V rocket taking off there, which is pretty awesome because that fit right on the nose cone of that massive rocket, which until I think until Starship, this has been the largest rocket, I think the tallest and most powerful rocket too, which is saying something, you know, for for 50, about 50 years now. 50 years. This magazine is just a fascinating chunk of history. And when we think about all the things that happened in this year in particular, 1969 is widely known to be a turning point in American and world history too. And what's also cool is this was in March 14th, and like I touched upon in my James Webb video, we found that Apollo 8, in the late 60s, the slew of Apollo missions were slowly inching progressively towards putting men on the moon. And only 3 or 4 months later, after this magazine was put out in July 20th, 1969, that's when Apollo 11 would put men on the moon. 2 men, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Michael Collins was in the still pretty amazing, position of orbiting the moon, while Neil and Buzz got to explore around, be the first humans ever to set foot on the moon. And that was only 3 months later, and they briefly mention it in this magazine, in the article here. And but it's just, to me, this whole magazine here is just, from the advertisements to the contemporary pieces to the they have some political commentary, social commentary, and the technology and the progress specifically of the Apollo missions. So let's see what else was going on in 1969 here. Yeah, I got a list here. 1969. So Apollo 11, we got 1969. If we had like the top 10 events from this year, it would be the Vietnam War was ongoing. I think it started in 66 or 5, somewhere around there. We had the Stonewall riots, series of spontaneous protest against police raid at the Stonewall in New York City marked the beginning of the modern LGBTQ movement. It was mostly about gay rights. The riots galvanized activists and led to the formation of various advocacy groups. Woodstock, August 15th to 18th, also in New York. This iconic music festival, held on a dairy farm in Bethel, New York, attracted an estimated 400,000 people and showcased some of the most popular musical acts at the time, becoming a symbol, of the counterculture of 1969, the late 60s and 70s. Who played at Woodstock 69? We had obviously Jimi Hendrix. I'm just trying to get a list. It's just a bunch of links to videos. I mean, yeah, I guess Wikipedia is the place to go, isn't it? says 3-day. Look at that. That's kind of a cool. That's a poster right there. And look at that. There we go. Would you look at that? White Lake, New York. Is this the actual poster? White Lake, town of Bethel in Sullivan County, New York. There we go. Friday, we had, I don't know these people, incredible string band, I've heard of them. Sly and the Family Stone, Bert Sumner, Sweetwater. Saturday, Canned Heat, Creedence Clearwater, Grateful Dead, Keith Hartley, Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, Santana, The Who. And then Sunday, it ended with the band, Jeff Beck Group, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Joe Cocker, the guy who sings the Buy With a Little Help from My Friends, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, Jimi Hendrix, Iron Butterfly, Inagata-Devita, 10 Years After, and Johnny Winter. That's awesome. And also in '69 we had Richard Nixon's inauguration. He was the guy who would get impeached, I believe, for the Watergate scandal. We had the first Concorde test flight. The British-French supersonic passenger jet, the Concorde, took its first test flight, reaching speeds over twice the speed of sound. The aircraft would go on to revolutionize travel, despite being retired in 2003. The ARPANET, probably maybe in the top 3 most significant events in 1969. The ARPANET stands for Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, and that was the first network of computers, maybe outside of an actual local building that was run from a significant actual geographical distance separating 2 computers. It was the precursor to the internet. It was a link established between UCLA and the Stanford Research Institute, marking the beginning of the internet age. Mariner 6 and 7 did Mars flybys, captured images and data about the planet's atmosphere and its surface. The missions contributed to our understanding of Mars and paved the way for future explorations. The Beatles' last public concert was in '96 at their Apple Corps headquarters in London. The impromptu performance was later featured in the documentary film Let It Be. Assassination of Robert Kennedy. And yeah, there's a lot else going on, but let's browse through this magazine. Let me get this out of the way. Hey, look at this, by the way, real quick. I thought this was pretty cool. I found this at the beach, and I live on a unique stretch of coastline, the Treasure Coast, here in Florida, where we actually have, it's one of the only places in Florida, other than the Keys, I guess, where you have rocks actually sticking out of the ground at certain points. They're not very high. They're like, 5 feet above the water. Pretty sure just the constant force of the waves swirling and drilling, with bits of sand, drill holes through this, and you can even hear, like, stuck in there, right there, in different places. There's still sand stuck in there. You can see right in there. Anyway, so it's a pencil holder, obviously, too. So now let's get to the actual magazine here, guys. The first thing we see when we open up is a Chrysler and AT&T advertisements here. So it's just funny watching the perspective, the change in technology, change in perspectives, change in fashion and style, how technology's changed us societally. Here we have over here on the AT&T ad. It's actually a pretty elegant ad. It's very simple, very stripped down. It's just a picture of a beautiful woman, clearly listening to something very attentively, and it says, "Why not return the compliment with a long distance call? It's the next best thing to being there." AT&T, your anywhere, anytime, anything network. It's fun to imagine in a world pre-internet, really pre-personal computer. Computers in 1969 were still the size of rooms, mostly. Imagine what long-distance calling really meant when you could either write a letter, send a telegram, or make an audio phone call, which you could near instantaneously hear and converse with someone hundreds of miles away. It's interesting. It's so useful too to remember, to have gratitude for where we are in our place in history with technology and medicine, air conditioning, refrigerators, hot water. So your next car, the attainable dream, Chrysler. How attainable is it? Over a third moved up from the popular smaller car field. Drive the attainable dream. 1969 was right after, it was 15. No, it was 25 years after World War II. In the United States, in 1969, we were becoming an economic superpower. So the middle class was rapidly becoming more and more wealthy. So it's, again, cool to, it's really interesting to look at this magazine from 1969 and remember the frame through which we got to view all this, the period of history of the world, and just how rapidly things were changing. The dawn of the computer age, we're in the space age. We still think cigarettes are healthy. Silva, the impossible cigarette, lowest in tar and nicotine of all 100s, yet has a better taste. So here's a quick review of the contents. We got book reviews, plays, movies, musicals, letter to the editors, Dateline America. Oh, that was a little article. I kind of read some of these through here to not be completely going in this blind. This was a little one about how the French population in New Orleans, Louisiana, was dwindling. I didn't realize that a huge portion of the actual population spoke French, or some dialect of it, and that was because, just like a huge portion of Canada, or a significant portion in around Quebec and other places too, they speak French too, just like in Florida here, how a huge population from Latin America and Cuba and elsewhere speak Spanish. And this in 1969 was talking about how I think they were refusing to teach French in schools. So, you know, they were essentially, it was an article about the New Orleans, the French Quarter, the French culture, that was the word I was looking for, are losing their identity, and they're becoming more and more assimilated into the wider, and the article was talking about kind of blander American culture, because it's so unique, that specific area down there. And here, about a 8-page article on the actual lunar module. We'll browse through that in a minute. And what else do we got here? Yes, some priest who's also a chef. Calories are only a demon to be exorcised. Furniture for the space age. It's about a civil rights movement. It was 1965, was it? Yeah. So I want to focus on the LEM, the Lunar Module, but I also want to kind of take a look at some interesting advertisements, such as the American Gas Association. The American Gas Association saying, look at those advertisements. You just have a cute girl dress up in a really ridiculous outfit. She's trying to be a flame, I guess. And advertising some futuristic technologies. And, you know, again, we're in the middle of, in 1969, I mean, this last the 20th century, the last over 100 years now, has been marked by rapid technological advancements. I mean, every 5 years we expect some new revolutionary technology, and even now I'm actually using GPT-4, ChatGPT, to, I looked up some things, like when was Time magazine first published? I mean, this thing is incredible with what it does. I mean, beyond answering simple questions, it's able to reason and argue and make statements and help you sort through your own thoughts when you're bantering back and forth with it at a level that's kind of creepy, just because of how advanced it is. And there's people, I've been listening to a lot of Lex Friedman. He's been talking about, he's had a lot of interesting guests on, including the Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who made ChatGPT-4, and whatever future models they're going to be coming out with. And if GPT-4 doesn't have some sort of autonomy and actual artificial intelligence behind it, true, in the sense that it could pass a Turing test and fool you into thinking it's real, has consciousness, some sort of glimmer of it, I'm sure the next iteration of it will. And it's just wild to think about, back then. Again, we were 3 months, March, yeah. 4 months from having men step foot on the moon, and we're possibly only a couple years from creating a network of digital, just a dynamic matrix of digital information and programming that is able to organize in such a complex way that we might not know whether or not it's conscious or not. And it's scary, but again, also kind of exciting. Also exciting and hopeful. Maybe it's going to revolutionize how we learn, how we teach children, and how we communicate, and how we sift through facts and avoid emotionally tinged arguments, and maybe it'll make our communication more efficient. I don't know. In a really, in a productive way. But, so that's all the context. That's all to put in context. All these advertisements are, they're referring to, a lot of times, they're alluding to how new and advanced and how cutting edge their technology is, and the word future is used a lot. Here we have the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. Just kidding. It says international paper has found a use for every part of the tree except one. It's a close-up picture of a nest. And this is a early, allusion to the sustainability movement, environmentalist movement, and it goes into saying, it takes 25 years to grow the kind of trees we need. So when we cut one down, we're not about to waste it, not the stump. We have a machine that cuts trees at ground level, not the bark. We use that as fuel. Not the leaves or pine needles. We leave them on the forest floor to prevent erosion of precious land. Not the sap. We refine that for turpentine. Not even the sawdust from cutting the tree into lumber. We use that to make pulp for paper. And of course, people need trees more than ever for things like medicine to fight arthritis, for automobile tires to make them safer and stronger, for toothpaste, permanent pressed clothing, sponges, movie films, cigarette filters, and fishing lures. Not to mention the 53 million tons of paper and paper products Americans use every year. 530 pounds for every woman and child, man, woman, and child. Let's see. Yeah, I had to look this one up. GPT says, it's difficult to provide. I asked, how many pounds of paper products do Americans use every year in pounds per person? And they said, in the past, it was estimated that the average American used 680 pounds of products per year. That's per person, I'm pretty sure. But it varies across newspapers, depending on what the person uses. Office paper, books. And unsolicited, it even added as a caveat, which is it's characteristic of a lot of the queries, the prompts you input into GPT. It'll always give you excess information, additional information that allows you to have context. And in this instance, it says it's essential to note that paper consumption may have changed in recent years due to the increased digitization and efforts to reduce paper waste too. So the actual figure may be different now, but it says it should give you a rough idea of paper products used in the past. So I just was, obviously we're using less paper products these days, and I was just fact checking that. And GPT is notorious now for not having accurate facts. I've been trying to learn about cosmology and things like particle horizons and just the way light travels across expanding space, accelerating expanding space. And GPT does not give you the correct information in a lot of ways that you ask it concerning that. So I'm a little skeptical about its ability to. It has a good reasoning ability. It can really, and it dumbs it down very well too. So it can reason through arguments, but it's the facts that it's using in its arguments that I'm skeptical about. Although I guess when it's also more advanced scientific concepts, I don't think it's at that level yet where it can reason through the behavior of physical systems in a way that it's actually predicting and teaching them in a correct way. But it has again, like a scary amount of ability to take a complex subject and dumb it down and explain it step by step in a way that really makes sense, but it still needs fact checkers. And this episode is becoming a one big plug for GPT, I guess. So anyways, this ad finishes up saying, we plant more plants, then we're cutting down up to 40 million new trees. Wow, in the next years we'll even double that. Our breed of trees, so they're also engineering, maybe genetically. It's a whole nother realm of, technology that I didn't even mention. The medical and genetic engineering, medical advancements, which is good and bad. I mean, the more I learn about it, the more I hear experts, doctors, PhDs talk about it, I'm a little wary about the fact that we don't have any long-term information on what consuming genetically modified food might do to us, including corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup. But let's see what they're doing with these trees here. Trees where birds build nests and wildlife and flourish. And this part of the forest we don't use up. We nurture the forest, birds, and animals with loving care. Our motive is selfish. Our motive selfish. The birds help keep the forest healthy. In return for their health, we take good care of our wildlife. Conservationists estimate there is more game in managed woodlands like ours than when the Pilgrims landed. Wow, look at that. Where good ideas grow on trees. That's a good tagline. I like that. International Paper Company. Let's check if they're still in business or if they've just changed names, or which I'm sure they have. Maybe I'll make this smaller so I can see. Does the International Paper Company still exist? Is it still extant? Let's see what it says. It always says that its data cuts off at September 2021. As of my knowledge, the International Paper Company is still in existence. It's one of the world's leading producers of fiber-based packaging, pulp, and paper, with manufacturing operations in North and Latin America, Europe, wow, all over the world. North Africa, India, Russia. However, the most current status of the company, it says, please check latest sources, as situations can change. Huh. So, that's, it's 50 years old now. Oh, and look at this, the wood paneling of the 60s and 70s. Georgia Pacific introduces paneling with the aged look of the old world. Warm. Let me try to pick it up for you guys here. I mean, looking at these ads it's almost more entertaining than the actual substance of the, lunar module. As cool as that is. Uncommonly beautiful, with any mood, from Nordic cool to the sensuous splendor of old Spain. We have a girl in a Spanish Zorro outfit there. I guess that's a painting on the wood. Finally, a paneling that captures the romance of the old world. From $25 for an 8 by 12 wall, 8 by 12 foot wall. It's not too bad. I thought this Scotch advertisement was pretty funny. Passport Scotch. It says, make your millions go further. It's basically saying if you had the wit to become a millionaire, we know you spend your money wisely. You couldn't indulge your millionaire's taste if you weren't able to manage your money. And that's what we do. We cater to people just like you. So it's clever. It's really that was a clever way of catering to people who, I guess, have the self-image of being wealthy, yet, wise with their money. And I don't know whether it is or not, but it's claiming to be a premium Scotch that's found its way around the tax man by bringing you a blend of Scotland's, you being Americans, I guess, a blend of Scotland's most outrageously expensive whiskeys in the least expensive way possible. So you have a great light Scotch, and at the same time you're blessed with a rich and robust Scottish character. If we were to bottle all Passport in Scotland, we'd have to charge you a premium price, but we bottle them here in the United States to save you money in taxes, which, as you know, dear fellow wise millionaire consumer, is managing money. And if it didn't have that worn green hue of a really old photograph, I might say that looks appetizing. And here we go, we got a little band of people cheering Ford on. Say it's the going thing, guys. It's the going thing. I don't think I remember that being a phrase from anything I've heard from the 60s. It's the going thing. The LTD. It's going fast. It's going great. It's the going thing. And look at that girl. That Well, I don't know what she's doing there. Is she holding a scarf or something? That's a weird pose, isn't it? She's just out in the field, looking back at you, looking at her car. Or if that's your girl and that's your car, maybe she's looking back and wondering why you brought her out here. If you're just gonna look at your car. It's quiet, strong, beautiful. Nothing comes close. We got some fancy leather footwear here. Some movie reviews. Life insurance. Health insurance, something like that. What is this? Contact cold medicine here. Instead of time-release capsules, they say 600 tiny pills, tiny time pills, and each capsule will take good care of you, good care of your cold for up to 12 hours, and the sooner your cold gets contact, the better. It's at your pharmacy. You know, the other day I actually read that most over-the-counter cold medicines, I do think they do something, but I'm pretty sure I read this. It relieved. It didn't really beat out placebos. Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't even have mentioned that. It's just gonna bring everybody down. Yeah, but I don't know. Whatever it does, there is no cure for the common cold. But it was interesting that it seemed to basically indicate that just the placebo effect again is really strong. If you feel like you just ingested something that's going to get you better, it works about as well as whatever chemical mixture cocktail is in actual cold medicine. So I thought that was interesting. Here we have Nabisco, another long-lasting brand. I thought it was a teacup, but I guess it's a sugar container and a salt shaker. The duet, the perfect wedding of two opposites, sweet and salty taste. At one point, it says new. I think there's a Newport ad. Is it at the back? No. Look at the back here, though. It's Minute Maid. Look how old that is. Minute Maid. Frozen concentrated orange juice. Look at that. That is some old packaging right there. Oh, that's right. Bing Crosby was a famous Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby, that's an actor, I think. Boards of Canada sampled him from a commercial from around this time.
If it's Minute Maid, there's no doubt about it. If it's Minute Maid, there's no doubt about it.
Anyways, I think there was a Newport ad in here, that Newport cigarettes, saying they have new packaging, a new look on their packaging, but the same great taste. And the new look of the advertisement was the same packaging they've stuck with for 50 years now, which doesn't always happen too often. And this here is this is life insurance here. A lot of these advertising tactics and approaches I feel like they're still used. These are pretty good. I mean, I enjoyed the show Mad Men. It's really interesting to see how they employed psychology and perception, status and class to sell a product. Sell you something cheap, but instead of making you feel of lower status for buying something cheap. They just make you feel like you got a good deal. One sip, and you'll forget how little you paid for it. Kentucky Tavern, baby. It's funny, there's a lot of cigarettes and whiskey. I don't know if they, I haven't looked through a modern Time magazine. I don't know if they still advertise whiskey, or alcohol. What's the new word? Groovy. Miniskirt, discotheque, happening? No, baby, it's polyglass. That's right. Registered trademark of the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. Because you're getting double the mileage from our best-selling Goodyear tires. Remember, if it doesn't say Goodyear, it can't be polyglass. I do like how minimal a lot of these advertisements are. Oh, and that was the article here about the Cajun country and the waning culture of the French, Creole French. Let's see what it says here. Yeah, so I guess the British kicked the Canadians. The French from Canada, and a lot of them traveled back to France back in the late 1700s, but a lot of them traveled to New Orleans and established an entire, culture that generations later perpetuated and kind of absorbed maybe Caribbean and other cultural traits to become a unique New Orleans French Cajun style of its own. The French language, as a living endemic tongue, is becoming extinct. For almost 3 centuries, the French influence has graced the southern part of Louisiana like a bouquet. Only a few years ago, you could drive the old river road down the Mississippi from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, or along the Bayou Lafourche and Bayou Teche, in the picturesque country to the west. And in village after village, notice the word village there, not city, you hear conversations being carried on in French. Occasionally, if your ear were tuned to it, you could detect the precise tongue of the bourbons which Creole aristocrats had savored and preserved like a vintage cognac. More often it would be the rippling patois of the Cajuns who denied formal schooling in French by the new American, state education system, bent on melding them into an anglicized society, made up in verve, made up in liveliness, what their speech had lost in correctness and formality. Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I heard, I think it might have been a Thomas Sowell excerpt or something the other day. He was talking about the how the lower class Americans, black and white and French and so forth, the working class Americans of the early 1800s increasingly extinct cultural practices and words, dialects of the old world, from Britain, French, France and Spain, until it became a very unique thing where it had completely died, including different card games. It's just interesting how, the lower class of 200 years ago picked up, we were influenced by the upper class. And then when the upper class moved on and certain cultural tendencies and ways of speech, phrases, sayings, dialects, fashion even, became obsolete, the lower class who had picked up on those qualities and things and kind of absorbed and assimilated them into their own culture to add some air of sophistication to them, they cling on to it. Even 100, 200 years down the line. It's funny how culture transmits and evolves, or in some instances doesn't evolve. Here we are, and we got the Lunar Module. It's an acronym for the Lunar Module, and apparently right in the opening line here it says they just put the E in the acronym so that it's pronounceable. But the E doesn't actually stand for anything, although it, I guess, used to. Let's see what it says here. LEM. Let's see, where does it say that? A handful of hatched in controversy, a handful of rough sketches. Maybe it's on the other page. Yeah, here's but it was cool. This article basically walks you through the evolution of it, which you got to remember when this article is written. This LEM is like having an article on Elon Musk's Starship, which just completed its first fully assembled test flight, I think, as of April or May 2023 here. It's May 19th today. But apparently this wasn't, we'll look at the diagram here, but it's an interesting story how things, in particular just the rapid advancements in technology, and just how having such an audacious, forward-thinking, beyond the cutting edge of technology goal that Kennedy did in 1960, I guess, saying we're going to get men on the moon before the decade ends. So he said, let's think about it. It's like Obama saying in 2010, by 2019, we're going to have men, humans stepping foot on Mars. And yeah, it's going to happen. And, if anybody, I don't expect you to have watched all 5 hours or whatever it was of my James Webb video, but, that project in itself, not even manned, it's not even a manned mission, a robotic mission technically, going to an already established location relatively nearby, much closer. It's only 1 million miles away versus the 20 million miles away, 20, 30, 40 million mile distant trip to Mars. Putting it in perspective, the the web took 25 years to develop, and yes, it's extremely advanced. I mean, the mirrors and the actuators, the movement, the precision alignment, and the not to mention the technology that is able to withstand, near zero temperatures in space and not be too brittle to crack, and to be able to take these the electronics and the chips, that allow the images to be so precisely, to get such precise, sensitive data that, we're seeing almost to the beginning of the universe. And that still took, as advanced as that is, it wasn't a manned mission. There weren't astronauts and safety mechanisms. The additional research and development that's required to make it habitable, to be, it's really the safety factor for humans that makes it such a big feat of engineering, I guess, really. And so, again, the historical context of this is just that the advancement was so insanely fast, and we only lost, and the only people they lost were 3 men in testing on the ground in a stationary mock-up of the actual module. They never lost anybody. Apollo 13, famously they almost lost the men. They had to, through just talking to Houston and them coming up with solutions on the fly, they were able to not run out of oxygen on their emergency trip back home when some failed there. But apparently they had more, and we'll see on this next page here. They had different ideas of how to actually transport humans to the moon. And this guy was not listened to for a couple years, and finally he was like, just sent a letter to the head of NASA, basically saying, no, we need a module. That's the smartest way to do it. But it's funny how people get, the best ideas sometimes purely because they are outside the acknowledged channels of the elite experts in any field. If they're coming from some lower level person or some person not even in the room of the top people, it just gets ignored, because we just have limited memory capacity to be able to evaluate all options of any particular endeavor that we're doing. So yeah, hopefully AI will help us out with all that. So they initially mocked this up, a piece of little, balsa wood and paper clips here, and let's see what it says here. So we got okay, so the concept that produced the LEM lunar module is even more audacious than the machine itself. It calls for a descent to the lunar surface from the orbiting mothership. Then, because the lunar module itself they have the command module, what's it called? The Apollo command ship. And Basically, you have a rocket ship, the command ship, a little bit larger, that has the lunar module attached to it, and it travels to the moon. And then when they get to the moon, the final design here was that it, which one is which here? Yeah, they were going to have two separate spaceships launch and then rendezvous in Earth orbit and then go to the moon, but they ended up just launching it as one single mission and having the space module orbit the moon. That was where Michael Collins was in a few months from now, in 1969 here, on July 20th. And then Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong slipped into the smaller lunar module here, and they released and went and kind of I was about to say like drifted down, but they didn't really drift. They fell down to the moon in a controlled fall, in a very controlled fall. And famously, Neil Armstrong almost ran out of fuel, and he had to, I think, manually take over. It was going to be an automated thing. I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong on that, but it was something where they were about to run out of fuel, and thanks to Neil Armstrong's piloting abilities, he manually landed the lunar module. This fancy wooden sculpture here on the moon, successfully. And then not only successfully landed it, but of course the successful launch and rendezvous back up to the mothership, orbiting the moon with Michael Collins above. 8 years ago, the scheme, and this is 1969, so in 1961, the scheme seems so bizarre that the obscure engineer who first suggested it, remember, this light is in the way, I keep whacking it. My setup is so janky. Good lord. I gotta get a more professional setup. This guy, right there, that guy, obviously got a promotion since then, that the obscure engineer who first suggested it was ridiculed. His lonely and courageous battle saved the U.S. billions of dollars, prevented years of delays, because remember, they were aiming to get to the moon before 1970 and landed in the summer, just 6 months before 1970, summer of 69. And if all goes well, his module will make a moon landing possible this summer. This summer. And to cut to the chase, we know all went well, of course. And no astronauts, so and it gives you a little rundown of what went down here. So in 1961, the agenda for the meeting in early 1961 was how to put a man on the moon. The nation's top space experts, NASA had only been commissioned as a government institution, separated from the Air Force distinctly in the 50s. So NASA was a brand new agency, and everyone had their own favorite method to getting to the moon and back. The speaker, an obscure 41-year-old NASA engineer, John C. Hubble, was offering a new scheme called the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous. This is different than what this guy chose, I believe. At a similar meeting a month before, he'd been He'd been received with indifference and gentle scorn. Now, as he talked in this flat, matter-of-fact Midwestern way, Hubble evoked outright hostility. Wait, I'm sorry, did I just screw that up? This is Hubble, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, okay. This is Hubble. Oh, good Lord. Let me edit that. I'll have to edit that down, guys. Sorry. So, yeah, his original scheme was the lunar orbit rendezvous. And he got shouted down. The other engineers said, "Your figures lie." Maxime Faggot, one of the prime designers of the Mercury spacecraft, said, was it Maxime? Maxime? He's been misleading. And then even Wernher von Braun, the famous rocket scientist from Nazi Germany, said he shook his head and said, no, that's no good. Von Braun and most of his rocket scientists favored the approach known as not lunar orbit rendezvous, but Earth orbit rendezvous. So they, instead of one, they were going to fire 2 massive Saturn rockets, and they one carrying extra fuel, the other carrying the spacecraft to be launched into Earth orbit. The rockets would then rendezvous, and the spacecraft would be launched to the moon. Faggot and others of the Space Task Group, which became the nucleus for the Project Apollo, they favored an even more straightforward method, just with one monster rocket larger than any yet, and any that would have been ended up being designed or manufactured. And it would carry the entire spacecraft directly from the Earth to the moon. The spacecraft would then detach and back down to the lunar surface. So instead of a 3-phase system, this would have been just a two-stage system. Also studying. Okay, let's see what else it says here. Also studying rendezvous and assembling operating space stations. At a meeting in 1960, the subject of the lunar landing came up. Yeah, so essentially his idea was to just create the Lunar Module, which was a much tinier spacecraft attached to the main spacecraft that would take them on their voyage to the moon. He says here, in the meeting he says, it occurred to me that the rendezvous around the moon was like being in a living room. And he says, why take the whole darn living room down to the surface when it's easier to just go down in a little tiny craft? And as soon as I saw that in the broad context, the concept looked very appealing, because he said after some back-of-the-envelope calculations, it became clear that what became the LEM offered a chain reaction of simplifications in development, testing, manufacturing, launch, in the actual flight itself. And interestingly, talking about Webb, who was the NASA administrator throughout this time, throughout the Apollo program and a little bit beyond, it says, when Webb announced that the EOR, the one where you don't have the lunar module and you just have a ton of fuel attached to a larger rocket, because you need, if you're going to descend to the moon in a larger rocket spaceship, you're going to need a lot more fuel versus the tiny amount of fuel that the lunar module needed. Webb thought that was the best method with the big rocket, and direct descent the second best. He didn't even mention the lunar module. And so finally, and later that year in '61, Hubble became so frustrated, exasperated, he went around to the bureaucracy and poured out his frustrations in a letter to Robert Siemens, NASA Associate Administrator, now Secretary of the Air Force. And he said, somewhat as a voice in the wilderness, his letter began, I've been appalled at the thinking of individuals and committees. He said, give us the go-ahead, and we'll put men on the moon in very short order. We don't need any Houston Empire to do it. So this is a nice little underdog story here. A nice little outside the institution story, or on the margins. And he says, then ironically, Maxime, is it Max? And is it Faggot? I don't know. Or Faget. And others in that Houston Empire, the main headquarters of NASA, I guess, outside Washington, that Hubble scornfully referred to, they remember his scheme, and out of necessity they swung over to it eventually. When von Braun changed his mind about my module in '62, he said, and I admire him greatly for it, I figured that the last hurdle had been cleared. In '63, several months after the LM, the Lunar Module, the LEM battle had been won, Hubble left NASA to become a consultant at aeronautics research at Princeton, and yeah, he won an award once they started manufacturing and testing it, and realized how effective it really was. It evolved out of the lunar schooner. The lunar schooner. From its birth to the maiden voyage with men aboard, the Lunar Module went through a number of model changes, most of them designed to reproduce its weight or reduce its weight. And then in 1962, modeled to the right, LEM has 2 docking ports, 5 legs, ended up with 4. And 4 windows, capsule-shaped fuel tanks. But by 1965, 3 years later, the craft had changed radically. The front docking port had been made an exit hatch. The body contours had been whittled away. The fuel tanks reshaped, the windows and legs removed. 2 windows and a leg removed. Seats had also been thrown out, allowing 2 astronauts to stand closer to the windows, which were tilted downwards to enlarge the visible lunar area. Total weight saved was 600 pounds. And it's, there's a huge, obviously, motivation to reduce weight in all types of flight on Earth and in space. And Webb was famously like half the weight of the Hubble, the mirror of Webb itself being like something like 6 times the surface area, was half the weight of Hubble's tinier mirror. So this is a back of the envelope calculation. One of his first designs, Hubble's first designs, called the Lunar Schooner. Is it schooner or schooner? I think I'm going to say schooner. The plan above, in a drawing done by one of his assistants in 1961, called for an open cockpit in a craft so small 2 men could be sent to the moon. In the left margin there said, "Make one and you go limousine," meaning a single larger ship like the LEM could be more adequately equipped than a pair of smaller ones. That's Ernie, by the way, guys. My dog, Ernie. Just waiting for me to go out and throw his FRISBEE. Hubble's own sketch at the right here, made in later 1961, shows a landing concept much like the one that was eventually adopted. And here we go, the actual lunar module, the eventual lunar module here. That was in a clean room in Cape Kennedy, and the lunar module, carefully swaddled in protective foils, awaits to transfer to the Apollo 9 launch pad. Awaits to be transferred. The final step. Yeah, this magazine's like, pretty large. It's like the size of my arm, half my arm to my elbow, so I'm trying to get it in frame here for you guys. But let's see, this says this drawing shows the final stages of their lunar module's I'll fix the lighting here. This journey to the moon, predicted to take place in July. Again, I love that the moon landing is in the future tense here. You got the 2 men in there, and I guess they stood, which I didn't realize, but it makes sense. The gravitation on the moon is so light that there's no real, safety concerns. They don't need to be seated, really. As the Apollo lunar module and the command module swing around the curve of the moon, some 70 miles from the lunar surface, the lunar module will separate from the mothership and begin its curving descent at 50,000 feet. 50,000 feet. Its descent engine, which can be throttled like the motor in an automobile, will fire to slow and steady the craft. And then at 25,000 feet, the lunar module's radar system will lock onto the moon's surface, while the tiny clusters of rockets that ring the cabin will nudge. There's a main thruster, and then around the cabin, right there, okay, up there, they help stabilize it. That ring the cabin, these rockets will nudge the ship into an upright position, keep it upright. You want that. At 700 feet, the main engine will be throttled up and the craft will hover like a helicopter on the moon's surface. So imagine how insanely just I mean, when you're in the moment, you're a pilot and you're trained and you've run through these procedures and what you're doing, like physically, mechanically, hand-eye coordination, through all the steps, the logistics, you're very much in the moment. So you don't, they specifically overtrain you so that you are doing everything literally on, or not literally, on mentally on autopilot. So you're not overwhelmed by worrying about what you have to do next. You're doing it with your eyes closed. And so they don't, they're so in the moment, in the flow state of successfully completing all the tiny successive series of operations that they have to do to land the craft and not die, and not take too much fuel, getting down and hovering, not hovering too long, and burning up all their fuel so they wouldn't be able to return and rendezvous with the mothership again and go back to Earth. But man, just imagine what's the chaos, and you switch off autopilot and you've landed, the dust has settled, and you step foot on the moon and you're walking around out there, and you just take a moment and think about being a human being on a different world and just looking around at the horizon, and you're walking around on another, essentially a planet. This thing is larger than Pluto, so you can really think about the moon as a planet. It's just, God, it's just astounding. Just conceptually, how nuts is that? Just, what must that have been like? I think only a dozen men walked the moon total of all 17 Apollo missions. Because remember, Apollo 11 was the first, and then Apollo 17 was the last mission. What an honor! What a what a magnificent experience! What a life-changing, in the deepest sense, experience. Paradigm shifting, I guess. I don't know. So the two astronauts here, peering out the windows, leaning forward and peering out the triangular windows directly in front of them. They're going to inspect the landing area as they're hovering above the surface and easing toward the moon, about 3 feet per second. Later, the 5.5-foot probes that extend from the ship's foot pads will make contact with the lunar soil. The lunar soil. That's nuts to think about. Kill the engine, then the LEM's spidery legs will settle softly down on the moon. And that's the Lunar Module article from our Life magazine. The daring contraption called the Lunar Module. And this article is just about the Concorde. I'm not going to read it. Talking about Russia is coming up with a competing model. This article is about the Vietnam War, and I don't want to. There's a body right there, so if you don't want to see that, don't look. Here's your warning. It's not gory, but it's this small little village in North Vietnam. And it was a cluster of ugly sheet metal shacks. It was basically like a small religious cluster, church, actually. And the North Vietnamese ran the people out or whatever, and then were bombed by the U.S. And I think that's one of the people who were bombed. This article is essentially just, it would be like an article about the Ukraine war today, saying, hey, it's ongoing. Here's an update about what's going on here, and it was the Americans and whatnot who bombed them. And so the priest who was kicked out, they weren't hurt, I guess, and he said, we're not angry at the Americans, but it's only natural that when the enemy comes, the Americans must fight them. I don't know why the enemy came, perhaps to conquer this little airport, but I don't know. It's a little cartoon about relations with the USSR, aka Russia, and its little, including Ukraine at the time, Confederation of States, Soviet. I don't remember what USSR stands for, actually. United Soviet States or something. I guess it's honestly, I don't know enough to even say anything intelligent about that. I gotta really brush up on my history. Campbell's soup here. Look at this. We got look at this. Chicken and dumplings, which I don't know if they make any of these anymore. But look at those little things. It looks like I don't know, pieces of candy or something. Chicken and dumplings, just brimming with tender pieces of chicken and chubby little dumplings in a golden broth. And over here we got a hot dog bean soup, which actually doesn't look too bad. Lots of smoky little hot dog slices, all those tender pea beans in a good sturdy puree, and something I could live my whole life without, stock pot full of rugged chunks of beef and kitchen cut fresh vegetables. Kitchen cut, really? It must be more of a style than a literal description of how they were made, I bet. And a savory brown stock. I'm okay. I'm okay on that. Here, Sears. Sears Sports Center, man. They dominated the world before Walmart and then Amazon. You got Sears. Look at this little, like, single piece, or what looks like a single piece boat with its own little cooler and, seats. You can attach a little engine to it. The guy says, talk about a boatload of great ideas, old Ted said. This boat's one of the best I've ever fished with. Look at that. Good for him. Oh, Ted was actually Ted Williams. Apparently, Ted Williams, the chairman, Sears Sports Advisory Staff. You know what, let's jump over to ChatGPT one last time and ask about Sears. Let's see. Explain the growth trend of Sears since 1969. Oh, we'll say the 60s, 1960s. This will be an interesting example to show you guys what kind of responses it gives. Sears, Roebuck & Co., commonly known as Sears, was a leading American chain of department stores for over a century. Here's a brief summary of its growth from the 1960s until my knowledge cut off in 21. 60s through the 70s, Sears was at the height of its success, and the largest retailer in the U.S., and its catalog business was hugely successful. The Sears catalog, everybody's heard of that, probably. Maybe not. Depends on how old you are, I guess. Company was introduced several popular in-house brands, including Kenmore and Craftsman, still very much alive today. In 1973, the Sears Tower in Chicago, I actually didn't know those two were related, was completed, and it was the tallest building in the world at the time, symbolizing, if that doesn't symbolize the company's dominance, I don't know what would. The tallest building in the world by the largest retailer in the largest growing, if not the largest, wealthiest nation in the world. Wow. That's a symbol of capitalism for you right there. 1980s, Sears began to face increasing competition from other department stores, but it still had a strong position, and it ventured into the financial services industry, offering brokerage and real estate services. Wow, I didn't know that was a thing. It was this decade when the famous slogan, "Come see the softer side of Sears," was aimed at promoting their clothing lines. And then in the 90s, the company began to struggle. In the 90s, as competition continued, Walmart surpassed it as the nation's largest retailer in 1990. I didn't realize it was that early on. The financial services division was not as successful as hoped, and were eventually spun off. 2000s, Sears difficulties increased, and 2005 Kmart purchased Sears. Really? Wow. I did not know that. I was just laughing to Molly the other day, my wife, and I guess, I'm hip to the idea, to the fact that Target is such a popular store for women to go, in particular, to go browse and just, do what Americans do, spend money and walk around and, plan what you're gonna spend money on in the future. And anyways, I honestly was, she was laughing at me because I equated Kmart with Target until like 5 years ago. Until Kmart started just like Sears closing, going bankrupt, and Target, or Kmart, right? I said Kmart going bankrupt, and Target is just booming. It's like thriving even more. I honestly, I always kind of pictured them as the same thing, because I'm pretty sure the Kmart I went to had like a Little Caesars pizza in it, and Target has food and Starbucks now in a lot of them. So anyways, the two companies formed Sears Holdings in the 2000s. They tried several strategies to revive sales, but including focusing on core customers and emphasizing customer service. And then 2010s to now, or 2021 at least, Sears' financial situation declined in the 2010s, many stores closing, and the company facing potential bankruptcy. In 2018, it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which I understand is a different type. There's different types of bankruptcy with plans to restructure the company and reduce debt. The company exited bankruptcy in 2019 after being purchased by Transform Holdco LLC, an affiliate of ESL owned by the former CEO of Sears Holding. The company exited bankruptcy in 2019. However, many stores were still closed as a part of the restructuring. So while Sears made significant efforts to adapt to the changing retail environment, it struggled against trends such as the rise of e-commerce and increased competition. As 2021, the company continues to exist, but its future was uncertain with a vastly reduced number of stores compared to its peak. And look, GPT says, for the most recent developments, I would recommend checking reliable sources. Yeah, let's check those real quick. Sears still in business. Once the closing is complete, there will be 17 Sears stores left in operation, according to the U.S., 3 each in Florida and California, 2 in Texas, 1 in Kansas, Virginia, Washington, New Jersey, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. How many Sears stores were there? So, at its peak, it doesn't say, I don't want to go into it too much, but 3,500 stores. Sears and Kmart stores. Oh, okay, that's when it was married with Kmart, including 2 2,300 full-on and off-mall stores, 1,100 specialty retail stores too. Man, went from 3,500 to 17. They are an endangered species. That's so wild. I mean, it's crazy to think they're even still open, but that's something. And I guess it's kind of crazy to think. For me, it's like, things, people die, corporations die, they get restructured, and they get bought and sold and absorbed, and whatever the word is. But it's also part of nostalgia I was born in 89, so like older millennials, young, and Gen Xers and all that, we grew up going to Sears, and I almost, don't even remember the Sears catalog, but I do a little bit from the late 90s. It's just funny thinking how much of a everything store Sears really was. It says Sears basically, manufactured the boat. It's quite the Walmart design. How about this ad? That's about as 60s as it gets right there with that fashion, the hairdo at least. Talking about a discreet AC unit. If you hear any cute little toddler in the background just singing, she's right next door to her room, her nursery, whatever. She just woke up from a nap, so she's in there singing to herself. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up, but yeah, it's just funny. The styles going on. There's multiple AC unit. So that's a big thing to have central AC, I think, at the time in the 60s. My dad said he was born in 58, and he said he didn't have central AC. In South Florida, too, if you guys, in Miami. Can you imagine that? I literally cannot. Cars didn't have AC systems standard. That's so crazy. Here's Father Robert, our chaplain chef or whatever. I was trying to think of some alliteration there. Our pastry pope, Robert C. Capon, Calories are only a demon to be exercised. Calories are only a demon to be exercised. We are a frozen peas with tiny onions and butter sauce people. That's nice. Look at that, $250 TV. Wow, look at that. You got a 16-inch diagonally, color portable in walnut, decorated with stand included. A little 14-incher there. Choice of white, brown, or walnut grain finishes. Yeah, I wonder when they're going to bring back wood finished technology. I feel like that has a really cool look. If you can't tell, I like wood. It's my bookshelf and all that over here. Kind of, you can see it through all my chaotic clutter of cables. There we go. I got my alliteration fix for the day. New Admiral color, 3-year warranty, 50% more power for a brighter picture. I love the little sales pitches they do in here too. Combines solid state components, brand new, with proven vacuum tube technology. My dad told me just yesterday, actually. I mean, he's told me before, I guess, but you know, parents, they tell you things. They have stories. They tell. And he reminded me, I guess I should say, the fact that 7-Eleven, again, he was born in 58, so, you know, around this time, 69, early 70s, you could go to the corner store, 7-Eleven, and check your tubes in your products. It's just like, it's funny how things have changed, you know? The little services that were offered. Clearer, brighter picture, less heat buildup. That was a big thing. Lighter weight, only 200 pounds compared to the competition. It doesn't really say that for anyone just listening. 3-stage IF amplifier that ensures studio sharp pictures even in weak signal areas. The newest and most dependable TV. What's this one here? When your day consists of drying tears, making 12 peanut butter and not peanut butter and jelly, just peanut butter sandwiches, solving a new math problem, and 1,000 other things, how do you have time for mascara? Fortunately, you don't have to, because Avon Cosmetics one of your Avon's neighborly representatives will come to your door. Man, the door-to-door salesmen and women. I forgot about that being a thing. And they, interestingly enough, they were talking about the death of a salesman, which I've seen the Dustin Hoffman movie with John Malkovich, I think. Yeah, Salesman. I think it's based on a play or a book. I forget, actually. Which is a good. It's fascinating to hear that you know, a dying whole industry, a whole career to be a salesman. You don't go to college, you just start traveling the country, door-to-door salesman. So your Avon sales lady here saleswoman, she'll help you decide what's right for you. She may do the same thing herself when she isn't selling cosmetics. She She won't mind if you have to stop and warm a bottle. She may do the same thing herself when she isn't selling cosmetics. So the next time she appears at your door, invite her in, instead of just not answering and pretending you aren't home. It's just such a weird thing. We have salesmen come to our door, you know, and other than Jehovah's Witnesses, it's far and few between. And sometimes you don't know if they're just crooks, you know, trying to steal your stuff. So it's funny how things are perceived differently nowadays. Bayer aspirin. Got a dishwasher here, GE, good old GE. Oh, and there's another one in here. I think it's look at this one's got like it's got its own little like wooden butcher block top to it. That's kind of funny. The general design overall hasn't really changed. Camaro. There's one advertisement coming up here. You know, I hadn't read this right here. It said, design often seems a function of place. It was in the shambles of post-World War I Germany that the Bauhaus, or is it Bohos? The century's most important source of ideas in architecture, industrial, and furniture design sprang up, flourished, and died, the victim of Hitler's advent. But since the Second World War, Scandinavia has led in furniture design and production. And now comes Milan. Its new ideas rising as gracefully and unexpectedly as Venus on the half shell, that famous painting. Yeah, the curves, and I don't even know if this is supposed to be practical furniture or just like the furniture equivalent of, you know, fashion shows, but the paddle wheel lamp. Yeah, like a lot of translucent plastics that are just as gaudy as it gets nowadays, considered by its architect designer to be more of a sculpture than a purely functional object. At least he's honest. She wanted to create a lamp that could diffuse light in the same way as the sun, and clear plastic gave just the effect she wanted. Yeah, that'll do that. As long as it doesn't melt. A moonscape. Lamplight. You know, everything's space age. The plastic pileup. Everything is plastic, man. Stacking furniture. Modular couches by the yard. That's funny. Martian Below. It's really a stereo set designed by the brothers Achille Castiglione, most avant-garde TV and radio manufacturers. I mean, that's actually kind of a, you know, it's got a little personality to it, a little face, a little Wall-E. Actually, a lot of a Wall-E look, doesn't it? Interesting, you know, 25 years after World War II, we got a vacation land Germany, I was about to say Luftwaffe, Lufthansa, German Airlines. Please, you know, come back. A tourism industry of Germany reaching out to Americans. Here we go. Here's the Maytag, The other one was a oh wait, no, that was a dishwasher. This is washing machine dryer combo here. They use, you know, as far as we know, we the consumer are led to believe by this advertisement that that is a typical American family here. Probably upper middle class. They got a nice set of encyclopedias there. After 17 years, Miss Koblen's Maytag finally called it a day. Which is, you know, it's interesting. It's like you don't typically hear a company flouting, or whatever the word is, touting advertising its product's demise. But that's the headline here. Our product called it a day. But, you know, again, I kind of like all the advertisements here. It's like honesty with an obvious twist in your perception. It's like, you know, like, yeah, like all products have a lifespan. Mars is 17 years, though. Beat that. GE. Sears. She said, I was starting to think old Maytags never die. Mine even survived 3 feet of water when our basement flooded. A nice little anecdote there. And we had to repair, what'd she say? We just let it dry out. 3 days later, washed 9 loads. In 17 years, it had only 3 repairs, with a total cost of $57. $57 in 3 years. 17 years and 3 repairs. It's quite a record. And then, you know, at the end, of course, they say, naturally, we don't say that all Maytags will match the performance Mrs. Koblen enjoyed, but dependability is what we try to build into every Maytag. Look at that happy family. I wonder how they turned out. Where's that kid now? The youngest Koblen there. Oh, we got Karen. Tom, Chick? His name is Chick? You got Jell-O. Advertising Jell-O pudding. It's creamier. I ain't got lumps. And then, clever how the Yanks have tucked away the filter. I didn't know that the company was that old. Uniroyal Tires. There you go. Just like I promised. Come to Newport, you'll like it here. Bright new pack. It's greener in the magazine than it is on camera here. It's funny. Bright new pack, cool new flavor, smooth, new tip. So yeah, so maybe they didn't even change the design. Maybe they just brightened up the colors, which is interesting. You know, that design's been around. Maybe it's so classic. Didn't want to mess with a good thing. Something that works. Tampax. This is a funny one. It says, new whole house, you know, central AC conditioner is so low into the ground, so compact your neighbors won't even see how comfortable you are. I guess she's also ducking, getting low. I don't even know. Oh, check this out. This page is a 1-2 combo here, but on the left here we got McDonald's introduces a Big Mac, a meal disguised as a sandwich. Literally the introduction of the Big Mac. Look at that. That's the whole thing right there, you can see. It's as good as it is big. Under scoops of our own secret sauce are 2 lean patties of 100% beef. There's a slice of melty cheese, cheddar blend cheese, some fresh, crisp lettuce, dill pickle wrapped in a toast of sesame seeds. Okay. It's all at your kind of place. And speaking of a logo that hasn't changed, those golden arches. That's there really is a timeless logo, isn't it? But yeah, I thought that was amazing. The introduction of the Big Mac in 1969. I didn't know it went that far back in time there. And then over here we got the when boredom and emotional fatigue bring on the housewife headache. All you gotta do is take 2 antacid tablets. Making beds, getting meals, acting as a family chauffeur, having to do the same dull, tiresome work day after day is a mild form of torture. I mean, yeah, these boring yet necessary tasks can bring on nervous tension, fatigue, and what is now known as the housewife headache. So, you're going to need some strong yet safe relief for this headache from excessive boredom. Man, talk about devaluing the, the work of a mother. Keeping a house together, keeping the family together. That's having to do the same dull, tiresome work is a mild form of torture. That's funny. Yeah, we got a couple more good, couple more advertisements. A piano, foot spray, Hitachi, some portable radios, some more wood paneling. Fantastic. Look at that. Look at that pool room. That thick brown carpet too. Looks like a lot of cigarettes were smoked in there. I don't even know. Oh, okay. This is Broadway. Some diet situation here. Before and after picture there. It's quite a drop. 100 pounds. And some more alcohol. We got a little vodka and tomato juice. Bloody Mary. Or is that Clamato? Is that tomato juice? Tomato, clam and tomato flavored cocktail? Yeah, I guess I've never had Clamato before. Yeah, I did not realize that was a mashup of clams and tomatoes. That's funny. Some decorations there. Look at all the wallpapers. Never realized how in vogue wallpaper was. But I guess wallpaper's been around for a long time. It's not just it's been around even in this, centuries. And look at this. This is another really, actually pretty genius advertisement. We're humans, so we're interested we look right at, we are very intrigued by emotions, powerful emotions, including one that looks like, a very bored man here. And it says the Belkins, it's a moving company, saying it's absolutely spine tingling. We have a great way of taking all the excitement out of moving. It took 78 years of practice. And it just has a very simple logo. Big, big truck with its name. And a quick 2-word description, moving and storage, and their number. With the word free in it. Or no, I guess that's next to the number. But, yeah, I like that. It's just like, it draws your attention to it, makes you want to know what the heck, and look how big that is. Just to get an idea, I don't have like small hands, so that's like, honestly caught myself off guard. I was looking at the camera, I'm like, oh my god, that's massive. Because I'm looking at all this through the camera, mostly. The camera being my phone. But yeah. Yeah, I'm interested in advertisements and what works and what doesn't. And we got the I don't even know. No, this guy was just doing a competitive sport where you go to great lengths to make the funniest faces. And some more whiskey. And they get a nice buzz. For people going places. Again, man, it's all about that self-image. You want to be the people who are good with money. You got money, but you're wise about how you spend it, including on your booze. And, you don't want to not be going places. He's not going anywhere. It's not a sought-after description of who you are as a person. For people going places, even if it's down to the corner store, remember to pick up Old Crow for home and for travel. Get yourself a flask. Man, I love advertisements. And the old Minute Maid here, classic. And that's that, guys. I thought this was a really cool little time capsule, so to speak. And hopefully you guys liked it too. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. If you enjoy my stuff, you can subscribe. If not, you don't have to. And thank you to all my Patreon supporters. Everybody who leaves kind comments, constructive feedback, and all the people showing me love. And Ernie is ready to go throw his frisbee. Let's go, buddy.